Good afternoon. How do you guys, is the conference good so far? All right. So I got a little giveaway to start this thing off. This is my way of getting good scores at the end, no matter what happens on stage up here. So I have Agile Software Engineering with Visual Studio. This book is not even out yet, okay? Brand new, fresh copies. Sam Guggenheimer, one of our guys on Visual Studio, he hasn't even seen this yet. His publisher dropped it off, and I'm going to give it to one person. So we're going to really test the room's knowledge of IntelliTrace. Although I'm not as sure some of the MVPs over here really should qualify for this since they've been around with us for a long time. So I got a trivia question for you. You guys all like our code names. We've got all these code names. They leak out every once in a while. Who remembers what IntelliTrace's code name was before we called it IntelliTrace? What was that?
No.
No? No? Oh, maybe I have to let one of the MVPs jump in.
Do they know?
They don't know.
Do you guys
they
know?
know. I know they know. Yes. You want,
there you go.
Can you turn me off so I don't blow up the room here?
Nice job.
There you go.
Proteus,
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
My name's Mark Groves. I'm Group Program Manager in Visual Studio Ultimate.
And I'm Tracy Turin, Director of Program Management on Visual Studio Ultimate.
And today we're going to talk to you about some advanced IntelliTrace. This talk is really kind of mostly focused towards ASP.NET developers, although really any developers are going to benefit from this. But the reason we're going to talk about that is for this release, we really focused on being able to make it super easy to collect IntelliTrace logs from ASP.NET web applications. The reason we did that, the web servers are the places in your organization that many times you can't just attach a debugger to. So we wanted to make it so you can easily collect the logs from that location. We're also going to show you how to take IntelliTrace logs and quickly find those problems that you just end up spending hours and hours on. And as far as the advanced topic here, we're going to show you how to create a custom collection plan to really filter down the data that you have and really target it towards your application. And last, we're going to show how to integrate IntelliTrace into your full development lifecycle through build and using symbol servers. So solving problems in production is just always too difficult. How many in the audience are developers? Do we have any operations people here? A few. How often do you let your developers just get on your production machines? Never.
There you go.
So what we needed to do here is make it so we can get the data that happens in production back to the developers so they're not spending days, if not weeks, trying to recreate the problem. And because usually once you get that data, fixing the problem isn't usually the hardest part. It's trying to recreate it. So as I've said multiple times already, our goal was to make it in this release so that you could collect in production. We have all our MVPs over here in the corner, and they've been asking for this feature since, minus a year since before we released it last year. We also wanted to make this an operations-friendly experience. We know that most operators don't want to put Visual Studio on their servers, so we made it so that you have a PowerShell environment to be able to collect IntelliTrace logs and get that back to the developers to quickly diagnose the problems. And as I mentioned, we also focused on ASP.NET applications just because we wanted to have diagnostics specific to ASP.NET, something that we didn't get a chance to do in the last release. So the first demo here, we're going to show how to configure IntelliTrace for your production applications.
So are you going to introduce our roles?
What's up?
Are you going to tell them who you are and who I am?
Oh, yes. I forgot. We're playing some rules here.
I was planning on joining in here at some point.
Yeah, Tracy's going to get involved in this a little bit here. So in our little story here with Fabricam Fiber, we have it's a website here used for our fictional cable company. And I am playing the operator role on this. So I'm going to be running the servers, keeping them running and everything like that. And Tracy's going to be my developer that, of course, always is causing me problems because she wants to publish new software to my data center that I'm trying to keep up all the time. If I navigate around Fabricam Fiber, it's a fine little website. But I notice there's a problem. On my reports page, we keep getting a little error here. Tracy, what's going on? Why do I have this error?
I don't know.
Well, but didn't you test this?
You know, it actually worked pretty well on my machine.
Okay. So it worked good on your machine. Okay, great. But I got the CIO calling me why this thing's not working. He wants to see the reports. What am I going to do? Can you got to help fix this problem?
Sure. If you can just let me know what server it's on, and I'll just connect TS into it, and I'll take a look and see what's going on.
No. The site's running except for this one page. I don't need you on there breaking it and adding a bunch of stuff. No, you just got to fix it on your environment.
Okay. Well, how about this? How about we try IntelliTrace and deploy that instead?
Wait, no. IntelliTrace is Visual Studio. I'm not installing Visual Studio on my server.
No. This, in Dev 11, they actually made it so we can put it in production. And actually, all you have to do is take this cab file, expand it, and install the PowerShell module, and you can go ahead and make it happen all by yourself.
I can try that. I like PowerShell. So we got a key fob here, USB key fob. Let's bring it up on the server.
I'll stay out of your way.
So I'm going to launch PowerShell as an administrator. As you see here, we just have this cab file here. So let me expand. I'm going to create a few directories to store this stuff. Create a folder for collection bits. And then we're also going to need a place for the logs. So now I just need to expand this out. I'm just going to expand it right on the USB key fob. I'm not even going to put any bits on the server. Does that sync the operations guy? Is that going to be cool? Okay. I learned a lot about PowerShell the last couple of days. So if I just show what's in the collections bit folder, we have a few assemblies in here. The really important one is this one right here, the PowerShell thing. That's the PowerShell module that I need to import. There's two other files that will be interesting to your operations people. We have two collection plans that are built into this cab file. One for what we call low mode, which is basically diagnostic events only, and the other one more a high mode where it's going to get a lot more data. There's a few, so I'll import in the module. And now I have a few commands. So first thing I can do is start IntelliTrace collection. So this is an ASP.NET web application. Actually, it's a MVC3 with Razor syntax. Got a lot of stuff going on in it. But I happen to know the app pull name for this web service. So Fabricam Fiber. Next thing I need to provide the IntelliTrace collection plan is the place where I'm going to drop the logs. So we created that folder earlier, trace logs. And the last thing I need is to decide which collection plan. We're going to pick the high collection plan so Tracy has as much information as possible to diagnose this problem. Part of this is we're going to restart the application pool to turn on the profile, the IntelliTrace profiler, start collection. While this is happening, it takes a little bit, but we're rejitting the website.
And jitting some more.
It takes a little bit. What's that? I think that's okay. Oh, there we go. Maybe that was it. Thank you. So now the first user hitting that website is definitely going to pay the cost for the rejit. Any of you that restart your application polls every once in a while, you'll be familiar with this.
Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain.
No, just navigating into the trace logs folder that I started collecting. You'll notice that an IntelliTrace iTrace file is starting to be collected for this app poll. So as I navigate through the website, we are collecting events on what's going on and putting that into the iTrace file. So let me go recreate the problem. So we got our error. You can do that a few more times to make sure that Tracy has enough data to make sure it's a consistent problem. Now that I've gotten the data that I need, pretty much now all I need to do is stop collection. I actually have two options here. I can either stop IntelliTrace collection or do a checkpoint. The checkpoint will allow the collection to continue, but will take a snapshot of that file and save it off. For this demo, I'm just going to stop collection. Give it the Apple name. Okay. So now we have our log file in the trace logs folder. There's two more things we need to do, and some of this is kind of point in time now that we're in CTP. We need to make sure the application poll is being run by a specific user. So to make sure that Tracy can open this log, I'm just going to reset the security privileges on this file. Zero objects found, nice. And the other thing I need to do is copy over a set of symbols. This is very specific to what we're doing right now in CTP. We have, since this website has Razor syntax and ASP.NET is dynamically generating it, we want to make sure we have the matched up symbols for Tracy so she can debug correctly. See if my okay, so now I have the key fob, my symbols, the trace log, and now I can just eject this from the server. Never put any bits actually on the server. Oh, let me get out of PowerShell first. So hopefully you were quickly able to understand that using IntelliTrace collection cab, you can quickly walk up to any machine and start collection without actually changing the configuration of that server. We're not planning on talking about SKUs at this point, but we are planning on making this cab available to everyone. You'll need IntelliTrace to read the log, but there's no limitation to your users on which servers they put this on or anything like that. So that'll help a lot for being able to make this available to a lot of your users. So now let's switch over and allow Tracy to fix this problem.
Cool, Mark. OK, so now that Mark has helped me out by giving me a repro of the problem he was seeing, I'm going to go ahead and hopefully you guys see that?
It's coming.
There we go. OK, so I'm going to go ahead and put this key in. As soon as I can find.
It's a problem with these really thin laptops.
Come on, there you go. OK, so one of the things I'm just going to go and take a look at is look at the folder. And as Mark mentioned, I'm going to need to also map those directories where those symbols are. So I'm just grabbing the name of the directories. And I don't know, for you guys who are just getting to see the CTP, I don't know if you've actually been able to install it yet, but we have this new great search. So I can just type in symbols, and I go right straight to it. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put that in. And I'm going to grab the second one.
We hope they have this fixed up before RTM.
We wanted to show you this, though, in case you go and play with this, because this is a pretty important part to make it work. So anyway, so now I've got my symbols. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and open the IntelliTrace file that Mike just gave me. And so as Mark mentioned, and I don't know, are all of you IntelliTrace users? How many people have used IntelliTrace Dev 10? Okay, so I don't know how many of you actually tried to use it on a web project, but I think you probably all ran into the fact that it just wasn't super helpful, right? So what we've done is as Mark mentioned before, is we've actually focused in on ASP.NET applications, what types of issues people usually run into, and catching those events so that we can be a lot more helpful for diagnosing problems. So I'm going to go ahead and look. He already told me that he was having a problem in the employees report, so I'm going to narrow down what I'm looking at. And as you can see, I've got some 200s, and I've got some 500s, and probably the 500s are the ones that you saw where he was going back and forth trying to reproduce the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and request the details. And now what I've got is I've got a bunch of information about what happened on that request. And one of the things that you can also see here is now I can actually see the data, the query that was run. So I can see the details of the query and what was passed in. I can see, and I now can see down here further that there was an exception thrown. So that's probably where my problem is, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start debugging.
Yes, so for those that don't know, I mean, we're basically, this is different source code, right? I mean, the stuff that was in production, the stuff that's in Tracy's version of her machine right now, they could be completely out of sync. And she's able to sync back up to the code, basically what was in production to repro the problem. Debugging off of a USB key fob is a little slower than normal. And that's a new error.
That's a new did we, as they mentioned yesterday, or a couple of days ago, this is a CTP, right?
Yeah. when we were preparing for this today, we ran into a few different problems, but not this one.
This is new. Okay, let me try it one more time. Or not. Yeah, I'm going to actually use that right now.
Maybe.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is, as soon as this stops spinning, okay, I'm going to go ahead and open another file. Okay, so I'm going to go to the exception, and I'm going to start debugging. And there we go. So now what I've seen is I can see in my code, a formatting string. I don't know, that's not telling me that much at this point, but I can, with IntelliTrace, I can actually step forward and step back, just as it executed on the server. So I'm going to go ahead and step back, because this isn't helping too much in terms of figuring out what the problem is. So I step back, and now I'm actually into my page. And what I can see here is the locals here. I can see get customer summary, which is this page where I saw an error. And I can see that I expand it and see that the customer was null. Well, it actually turns out that I never expected any of these guys not to have some tickets assigned to them, right? Because they're supposed to be working. So anyway, it looks like I didn't have the right check here for a null customer, or no tickets assigned to somebody. So that's actually pretty easy to fix, right? But this is a great example of where as a developer, we get our test data set up, we test it, and we think it's all fine, and we put it out in production, and it breaks immediately because it's just a test case of data that we never expected. So I could have spent a lot of time trying to reproduce that in my environment, only to just be shooting in the dark trying to figure out what happened.
Can I switch to the slide?
Yep. Okay, so like I said, having the IntelliTrace logs for us as developers made it super easy for me to fix the problem. I didn't have to spend any time trying to reproduce it or anything. Mark could actually immediately show me what the problem was. And we did all that without changing any code. He expanded on the key, and I opened the IntelliTrace log and went through it. Now, of course, what would happen next is I would go and fix that problem, and I'd give Mark a fix for it, and he'd redeploy it.
Great. So this seems pretty valuable. What else can I use this for? The times whenever there's that flaky problem that only happens once every couple weeks in production?
Yeah, sure. We can try IntelliTrace for that as well.
So we seem like we collected a lot of data, though. I'm a little concerned. How much of this we're going to be able to collect? Do we have to collect the world, or what's the deal?
No, actually, in that case, what we would do is we'd go ahead and create a custom collection plan, which allows us to take a very targeted look at the problem. And we can really zero in on an area that we're seeing problems, and that allows us to have an easier way to let it run for over a period of time to actually see if we can reproduce the problem.
So how do you normally do? I mean, just targeted stuff. What do you normally do?
Well, normally I'd have to go back in, and I would actually start to put some logging code in, and of course that would mean that I'd have to go and have you redeploy, and I'd have to get in your line.
You keep getting my maintenance window. I think it's next month.
Right. So, actually, you guys are laughing, but you know it's true. So So let me actually walk you through what it would take for us to deploy a custom IntelliTrace. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the debugging of the previous session. And I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to go and look for the method that
yeah, we've been having some flaky problems with the assigned schedule, and the tickets, the agents have been saying that sometimes they don't get tickets assigned to them correctly.
So I was able to, again, another handy feature is now that we have the search in the Solution Explorer, I was able to type in the name of the method, and it went right down to it. So now what I can see is, like, you know, as I said, and this is where I'd start figuring out what things I wanted to log and capturing those, and I'd get marked to redeploy. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a collection plan. And what I did here is I actually had a base template that shipped in Visual Studio and for the low setting. And I went in here and I looked through.
So this wouldn't be a 300 level talk if you didn't get a bunch of hacking XML, right? So
yeah.
just want to set expectations here. Now, this is not the experience we eventually want. We do want to build a first-class experience around defining your own custom collection plans. But at this point, Trace is going to define it straight up in XML.
Right. So what we have here is you can see categories. And again, for those of you who've already been using IntelliTrace, you can actually, you've seen these before. So what I can do now is go ahead and name a new category for myself and add it to the list. And then down, a little further down, I've got a definition of that category and what I want to capture. So you can see that I've got the assigned schedule method that I want to capture. And I've got in here some custom messages that I want to capture as well. So rather than just dumping out data and expecting whoever gets it to understand what's there, I can actually have a custom message that is a lot more readable for anybody else who's going to look at it, because it might mean something to me, but if Mark has to look at it or a developer behind me is going to look at it, it has a little bit more information and context that helps them understand what the point of the message was. So that's pretty much it. I just added a category. I added a new section, a diagnostic event specification that described it, and that's all I have to do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and test it, because that probably is a good idea.
Oh, you didn't test the other part of the system before.
Yeah, but I'm a quick learner.
Yeah, she is my boss, you know.
So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and it's spinning up.
So you're now using this custom collection plan in IntelliTrace in the F5 scenario. In
my F5 scenario, just like we did for Dev 10. So I'm going to go into to the tickets. And I can see that there's, these are all assigned, but let's just mess with Brian and give him a bunch more stuff to do. Okay, and so we'll just pick a time slot and confirm. So that should probably be enough for me to actually test to make sure it's capturing what I want to capture. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to hit break all. And then I've got everything that's happened up till then. So I'm going to drop down on the all categories.
So let me ask, the guys that have used IntelliTrace before, did you guys know that you can filter on categories? Yes, okay, good.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, so now what we're going to do is, of course, turn it all off so we can get rid of the noise. And I'm just going to pick my new category, which is Fabricam Fiber, and go back here. And I see that I actually have a message here. And it says it's ticket number 6 and so on, just like I asked it to do. So now I have some context to work with. So this looks pretty good, and I think it's ready for me to give back to Mark, and he can go put it into production and let it run for a bit until we till we actually see the problem again.
So what do we have to do to give me this new collection? So for example, I have this application in production, you have newer source. So you're going to have to give me a whole new binaries, or
nope.
do I?
No, I'm just going to give you the new collection plan, and that's all you have to do.
Okay, so I can use that in that cab file that you gave me earlier.
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's nice.
So here, now what we saw is we started out just using IntelliTrace in a high mode for a production problem that we were actually fairly easily able to reproduce in production. And then the second one we showed is doing a custom collection plan for a little bit more tricky types of problems, or the ones that happen a little bit more intermittently that we can then leave running for a longer period of time until we run into the problem. All of this we did without touching any of the code, and Mark and I are still friends, and it's all good.
Cool. So hopefully you guys have seen that this has been a pretty valuable way of diagnosing problems quickly from production to development. One of the challenges, though, to make this all possible is making sure that you actually have the symbols. So let me ask you this question. How many of you keep the symbols from the applications that you deploy into production? Okay, so maybe a tenth or maybe 20% of you guys. So before that wasn't maybe necessary. You weren't keeping your symbols around because you didn't have a whole lot of use for them, or your operations people probably didn't know what they were going to use them for. Well, now that you have IntelliTrace in production, we're going to need to keep hold of that information. I'm going to quickly walk you through some steps to integrate this whole life cycle into your process. So how many in the room are using Team Foundation Server? Okay, good. How many are using Team Foundation Server for build? Oh, good number, good. So you guys may already know this. I hope you do, but I wanted to make sure that we spend a little bit of time on this because we found in some user studies recently that there's a significant number of customers that really don't know how to get symbols synced up with things, and we find it pretty important to make sure that you can actually debug the code and get that real rich experience that we showed earlier. So I have a build set up over here on my build server. Of course, I have some good builds and some bad builds. But inside of VS, actually, you can do this in Visual Studio 2010 and also in 2011. If I edit the build definition, the build definitions are pretty simple. You have the name of it, what it's going to trigger off. In this case, I have a manual build. I can also set it up for continuous integration, rolling, or gated check-in. We need to know which workspaces we're going to use to build this solution. The next thing I need to do is the processing. This is where all the interesting things happen. So I already went in here, and so this is the one line you need to set up. So when people talk about symbol servers, sometimes I've talked to a lot of customers, and they seem to think that you need a server. A symbol server really is nothing more than a file share that everyone can get to. So it's really, really simple. So what we need to do is I shared out a folder off of this build server and just turned it on. So now every one of my builds is going to save off the symbols into this symbol drop folder, along with the source code. Now the key to this, though, is to make sure you maintain this stuff as going forward. So for example, if I go in and view the history of the builds, whatever build ends up moving to your staging production environments, you definitely want to retain that indefinitely, or at least until you update it to the next one. And that's really pretty simple in the build controller. All I need to do is say retain it indefinitely. This will keep it from being deleted or overwritten by other things. This will make it simple so that when you get that problem in production, you can recreate it and get the source matched up from your source control system. The last thing I need to do is map it inside of Visual Studio. You saw Tracy do this earlier. We go into symbols. And I just map out. And that's it. So now when I get a problem from the production environment, we're going to be able to recreate and map up the exact matching source files to the files that were published into production. So I know it's a little bit of work up front to set up your symbol server and your build server and stuff, but we definitely believe that if you do that little bit of configuration up front, the time you're going to save on the back end of trying to match up your source code to those symbols is going to pay off quite quickly. So what do you guys think? Is this going to be helpful for you? Okay. That's it? Just nods? Okay. That's better. So I can work the audience, you know. So hopefully you'll find that we've added a lot of capabilities to really focus on ASP.NET web applications and filtering down that information. As Tracy showed you in the beginning, we have the ability to filter down the IP addresses and filter down the error codes, kind of get you targeted into what that problem was. Because as everyone knows, it's not actually that difficult to fix the problem in many cases. It's usually just trying to recreate it. We also showed you how to do the new collection plan, custom collection plans to get really targeted and to make it so that you're not writing a bunch of logging code all over your application and redeploying that every time you want to make a change. And then last, as I just showed, was our ability to tie in our symbol server capabilities in TFS to make that simple in the end. So I want to talk about a few other talks that were already in the day or during the week. We had Doug Newman talking about TFS on Azure or in the cloud. Earlier today, Aaron and Peter talked about working on Agile teams. You should catch that video. It's definitely something to watch if you haven't gone to go see it. Tomorrow morning, Jamie is going to talk about a lot of improvements that we've done in the developer collaboration, along with massive improvements in source control. So if you're all using TFS today, definitely a must-see opportunity tomorrow. And then we're going to do a talk about architecture, and hopefully we're not going to have any demo snafus. So we also have some great hands-on labs and virtual machines that you're going to be able to get. And I think Brian published that to his blog, hopefully, today. And also the documentation is quite good. So we definitely want to make sure that you guys take a look at that. I know usually it's never read the manual. But to be honest, we put a lot of work into the documentation. So please use that first. And thank you. I want to really thank you guys for coming out today and coming out to build. Please fill out the feedback forms. And we do have a little bit of time, so if we want to do questions now, if that's OK with the AV guy. Actually, if you can come with the mics so that we can do the recording. We're also going to be at the Ask the Experts after, I think it starts at 5:30, maybe someone can correct me on that. But Ask the Experts tonight, so you will be around there. Also, come to the Visual Studio ALM table. I'm going to take this one here first.
Yeah, so first question, ASP.NET, that's great, covers most things. What about not ASP.NET?
I'm sorry, non-ASP.NET?
Non-ASP.NET, we're hosting WCF in our own worker role or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anything in basically an IIS application pool will collect.
Okay.
One thing we try to make sure of is, since we need to restart that application to tie in the IntelliTrace profiler, that was the one that we really wanted to make easy in the PowerShell environment. There is documentation to be able to start and stop collection for more advanced scenarios, but we wanted to really make the kind of main line using the PowerShell, just doing the IIS app pulls.
Okay. And one more question. It's been in the box, but it's not very well documented. I want to extend this thing. I want to capture events on like things inside the framework that I actually consider important with my own trace events. I know.
Yeah. So when Tracy did the custom collection plan, this is what we were talking about earlier. We want this to be the thing that you're going to create and say, I want this method, or I want this class, or maybe I don't want anything in these other sections, right? Right now, we don't have a great experience over that, obviously, unless you want to hack XML, although I'm sure a lot of people like to do that. But what we're saying right now is this is our roadmap. We're planning on making this first class. Right now, I didn't have a great tool for it, but yes, that's definitely our roadmap.
But even beyond the XML?
Oh, yes.
Programmable data?
Yeah, so we definitely think hopefully either RTM or a little after RTM, we'll have some sort of tool to make that authoring easy.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, a couple of related questions, really. So at the beginning of the demo, you showed the error, and you actually had a source code reference and the method itself where the exception was thrown highlighted. Yep. So you had the kind of debug reporting turned on the web server.
Sure.
And you also presumably had the symbols and the source code deployed on that machine as well?
So obviously demo. But
would that work without all that stuff?
Yes, it would. Particularly if you had the symbols saved on your build server. So in the demo, we pushed everything over just to make sure everything would work for the demonstration. But as long as you have the build server set up with your versions of your PDBs, you'll be able to match them up no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
It actually works better.
Right.
It actually works much, it's designed much more for that scenario.
Right, so you don't actually have to push the symbols.
No.
Right,
No.
That's great. That was my main.
Part
Sorry if
it
that...
might have been not really clear that the part where we did copy across some symbols, we hope that's probably a point in time for the CTP, but it was the Razor part of the app that actually got regenerated dynamically. And in order for you to effectively to debug, just like we did where I went and saw the problem actually in my page, then we need to have that information. Otherwise, of course, I wouldn't have gone there.
Sure, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so second question. I've used IntelliTrace a couple of times, and when you've got an unhandled exception, that's kind of a pain in the arse.
Sure.
So you did quite an interesting thing when you demoed it. You actually stepped back in the source code. Now, I've only ever managed to get that to work in a normal debugging session, because obviously when you step in the debugger, that generates an IntelliTrace event. And I'm assuming you need to switch on some other events to actually be able to do that on a production machine. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we defined new collection events specifically for ASP.NET.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so we've added basically more diagnostics.
What kind of impact does that have on the performance of the site when you're running IntelliTrace?
Well, I'll give the classic answer. It depends. And the MVPs in the corner know what I'm talking about. What we're seeing right now, and we're definitely testing and tuning this, is that if you're running IntelliTrace low, it's about the response time of the web application is about twice of what it normally is. But if you turn IntelliTrace high on, which is what I did, of course, that's getting everything, it really then does depend on your application, because depending on what the flow of your application is, what type of data you have, then it can get a lot slower. But that's really why we want to enable you to decide which things are important to collect, because that's more like low collection with your information. So that performance is much higher.
Right, and that's all tweakable in the XML file.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what you saw me do.
But we would love you guys to play with CTP bits, and we'd love feedback on that.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Cheers.
Just a simple clarification. You said this was for the ASP.NET experience, but the contract of allowing IntelliTrace in production, is that for other types of
Yes, so
Skills also.
basically from a licensing agreement perspective, we are going to free that up and you'll be able to use that. Basically in Visual Studio 2010, we knew that the performance wasn't there and we also had a few infrastructure pieces inside of IntelliTrace that just was not going to make it scalable on production grade servers. So we've been working significantly on that, and so we've opened it up so that basically the license will be now, you'll be allowed to use it on servers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Just to follow up with that, you copied around a little
CAD file?
Yeah, that's kind of hard to do on virtual machines, especially ones when they don't allow you to write to them in the corporation. So do you have kind of an enterprise way to get these to servers, or what's the concept?
Well, there's a few things we can do. And this, maybe we want to take this one offline, but there's a few things you can do on this one. One thing is this does work using remote PowerShell.
Yeah.
So if you put the cab file on all of your VMs when you've deployed them, you can use remote PowerShell to go and interact with them. Of course, we're also working with our System Center friends over for Avicode, and they have additional diagnostics that are a little bit more focused on monitoring long periods of time. IntelliTrace is definitely more focused on finding that critical problem. So I think there's a few options there for VMs.
Thank you.
Sure. Over here.
What if your code is obfuscated?
So if your code is obfuscated, there is a solution for that. It has to do with the symbol server. Come by and I will get you a blog post that helps with that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So I'm currently using Elmer for production logging stuff, and then doing the whole.
Can you get a little closer? Thanks.
Sorry, yeah. I'm using Elmer at the moment for logging. It's really useful to get hold of all of the HTTP state that's being passed around. So just what information you capture at the moment. So I saw you've got the HTTP return code. Do you have the form data, the post, all the query strings and all that stuff in there as well?
So we definitely have the ASP.NET query information of actually what was requested to the server, requested to the SQL server. But we are still tweaking what we collect on ASP.NET. So definitely would love your feedback because this is we are looking at competitive logging platforms to make sure that we're able to.
We use a mixture of web forms and MVC. So especially form post stuff is a pain if that goes wrong. The other thing is relating to obfuscation. What about sensitive data? So personal identifiable information. If my shopping cart crashes, I don't really want my logs to have everyone's credit card numbers in them.
Yeah, yeah. So we've talked to a lot of customers on that one, and there's definitely organizations that have that problem. One of the things, we don't really have a way of knowing what is sensitive data besides giving you the ability to exclude either classes or full assemblies from the collection. And that is something you can do today. You just add in an exclusion, basically blacklist, whitelist type capability. With the custom collection plans that Tracy showed, you can get in there and actually say, never collect anything from this class, for example. But then you're going to have big gaps, obviously, in your collection.
Yeah, if you could do it on a field level basis, that would be better.
Yeah.
Or we drive it by attributes, maybe. But okay,
exactly.
Thanks.
Sure.
So my question is about AviCode. I think you guys acquired AviCode last year. So what's the difference between these two tools?
So AviCode, if for those that are still here not familiar with, AviCode is really focused on a monitoring solution, and they do have some more advanced diagnostics. And rightfully, their goal is to run all the time and know what the state is of all servers, and they roll up all the log information streamed into a database. So you get a lot more reporting, a lot more rich information about the state of your applications over long periods of time. IntelliTrace is really focused more on getting a lot more deep information, getting every call. They purposely do not, AviCode is trying not to collect. It's trying to collect as little information as possible to provide the least amount of overhead on your application. IntelliTrace is trying to collect as much as you can to try to diagnose the problem for the developers. We are actively working with the AviCode team to kind of combine these efforts over the next 2 years to make sure that we have something that provides the solution.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergy there.
Okay, so probably in the future we can probably expect both can merge together? Is that what you're saying?
That's our hope.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
awesome. This is great news.
We'll certainly, I mean, we are actively working
Yeah, we're
with
very
them.
actively working on this.
Okay, another thing is, can I do a event-based kind of a capturing? So what does it mean is, you don't really know when production has a problem. Sometimes there's an exception. Sometimes just, the site is slow.
Yeah.
So can you just set a threshold, for example, the average response time for the HTTP request is longer than, 2 seconds. Then you start to get it running. Is that something you can do?
That's something that Avocode's a little bit better focused towards.
'Cause that's more of a monitor.
Yeah.
That's where the line gets blurred of the monitoring versus the...
So how we kind of see this is, when you have that problem, but then you don't have enough data to really diagnose it for the developers, if that's the case. If it ends up being a code problem, then it's turn on IntelliTrace, get that rich information back to the developer. So Avoco is really going to be helpful for the monitoring of when that problem happens.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you, everyone, and hope you have the great rest of your conference.
Thanks.